Γεια σας μαθητές, salute discipuli, welcome students, friends, viewers, and this is lesson 7 of my medical Greek and Latin series, which I'm happy to see that some of you have been enjoying. Now today we're going to do something a little bit different. I'm not going to introduce any new roots or prefixes, suffixes, or anything like that. What I want to do today is apply what you've learned. So hopefully you have been taking good notes, you've watched the first 6 videos, and now we can start to disassemble words, analyze their component parts, and reassemble them and figure out what these mean. And I imagine if anybody out there is going into medicine, these will help you remember what these long medical words mean. So let's go. I'm not going to do too many words, but hopefully you'll get a feel for the method. Here we go. So the first word here is abiosis, or abiosis, if you'd rather say it that way. And when we break it up, we see that we can identify the parts. There's our alpha privative, right? Not. Like remember we did typical, atypical. There's bio, which is life. And that cis at the end is actually osis, but because bio ends in an O and osis begins with an O, we're only going to keep one of them. And of course, osis is the abnormal condition. Now we can put them back together. And we're back to our original word, a state in which life is absent. Okay, so this is a word that basically is about lifelessness. There's your Greek. I'm not going to show you the Greek for all of these. Those of you who have been Greek students for a while should know at this point how to construct the Greek version of the word from the English letters. But there's the abiosis and the aviosi, which is the newer form. And there are some words that you get with osis, abiotic or abiotical, which is less common and generally, although it does happen in English, using al, which is a Latin ending, on a Greek root, it strikes me the wrong way, but we can't get away. We have things like magical that we can't get away from. And by the way, a big thing I want to point out here is that when we talk about nouns, we talk about their countability. Can they be counted or not? For example, in English, equipment can't be counted. You can't say one equipment, two equipment, or one information, two informations. Those are uncountable nouns. Abiosis is countable when it's one. We use an is. And when there's more than one, we do this. And then the pronunciation changes to abioses. Just like one crisis, two crises. Okay. What we unfortunately have happening is that some people will say one process, two processes. That is just a poor attempt to sound like you know what you're talking about, or you know how to say it. This es in the plural is something that happens with Greek words from the third declension. Okay, and we'll be talking about the third declension in an upcoming episode. Let's move on. Okay, here's a nice long one, erythrocytosis. Let's break it up. You'll remember that erythro is red and cyte is cell. And there's your osis again. So red cell abnormal condition. And erythrocytosis is a symptom of polycythemia, which is the overproduction of red blood cells. Okay, and there are the Greek versions of the words. You can see that erythrocytosis is just a little bit different in the Greek. But polykitaremia, there's your polycythemia, also a little bit different, but sometimes they do have a syllable or a letter that's in a different spot, and that's because spellings have changed. And again, IS becomes ES, and OSIS becomes an OCs. Just like I said, paralysis, paralyses, crisis, crises. It's a really important point. Here's a word I'm pretty sure has come up in a previous video. Okay, we have nephrolithiasis. You may know at this point that nephro is kidney and lith is stone, and an iasis is an abnormal condition or a disease. So a nephrolithiasis is the formation or presence of calculi, kidney stones. That's all there is to it. And there is there's what it looks like in Greek. There shouldn't be any surprise there. And again, it's a countable noun because it ends in IS. It'll be ES in the plural, and that ES will be pronounced ES. The next one here is exocardia. And we know that exo is outside, card is the heart, and ia is a state or condition. So what is exocardia? It's a congenital condition in which the heart is out of place, which is kind of frightening, I guess, if you think about it. Exocardia, there's your Greek. And this one might not have come as a big surprise. And you'll get adjectives with cardia like cardiac, which we've heard many times before in English. Moving right along, we get to a confusing one, arthrosclerosis. Arthro is joint, sclere is hard, and osis we know is an abnormal condition. So let's put them all together. And we reassemble it to get arthrosclerosis, a hardening of the joints. Now, you have to be careful with some of these. This is not arteriosclerosis. It looks a lot like it. This term is kind of, it appears to be falling into disuse because I hear a lot of people just say joint stiffness these days. And again, there's the confusion with that word there in white. And let's take a look at that. Arteriosclerosis. Arterio, we've already learned, is artery, and we have sclere and osis, and we reassemble them. To get arteriosclerosis, a hardening of the arteries. I'm sure I'm oversimplifying these. I'm not, I'm not a medical professional or anything like that. I'm just looking at it from a linguistic point of view. So if you are going into medicine, please do a little bit of research so you know what these things are in detail. And arthrosclerosis, the previous word, and arteriosclerosis are not to be confused with, oh my goodness, atherosclerosis. Let's take a look at it. And when we break it apart, we'll see something we haven't seen before. I don't believe I've given you the word etherio yet. It's an old Greek word that means grit or plaque. And we've got our sclere and our osis. And when we put them back together, we get this atherosclerosis, which is just a buildup of plaque in the arteries. It is connected to arteriosclerosis, but again, that's something for the medical students out there to investigate on their own. Moving on to a different word family, here we have Cephalalgia. You'll notice that many of the ones, actually all of the ones I've selected for this video are three-parters. We have cephal, which is the connecting form of head, and we have alg, which is pain, and ia, which is a state or condition. So what is cephalalgia? It's just a fancy word, or the official word, for a headache. I should point out it is not the word for a migraine which falls into the category of cephalalgia. And if we wanted to count it, we would use A and AE. Okay, like nebula, nebulae, for example, formula, formulae, or some people like to say formulae. We're not going to say cephalalgias to talk about more than one. Those of you who've had Latin will certainly recognize this as a first declension. At the beginning of the first declension sequence where we go from nominative to genitive, those of you who've been with me in Greek, especially in ancient Greek, will certainly recognize the alpha iota, which is the old plural and is often represented by these Roman letters. And there's another look at what the Greek version of these looks like. Cephalalgia with the Greek pronunciation. And let's take a look at one more, the periosteum. We'll break it up. We know that peri is around, right? Like perimeter and periscope and peripheral. Ost is the connecting form of bone. And eum could be a couple of things. It's place or membrane or connected tissue. So the periosteum is just a membrane covering the outer surface of bones. It's the membrane around the bones. And there's what it looks like in Greek, periostel, periostea. Now that is a second declension neuter in Greek. And those of you who take Latin should know your second declension there, umiomo a ormisais. One periosteum, two periostea. And if we were to be very technical about eum, we would say one stadium, two stadia. Okay, those eums, IUM, EUM, will become A's because they should just mimic the Greek and Latin forms. Okay? Now, I only did 9 words here, but it did pretty much fill out this entire episode. If you would like more videos like this where we analyze words, please let me know. You can just leave a comment. Otherwise, I'll just move on with the next lesson and assume that you now know how to break a word up, analyze its component parts, look for the affix that you know, and the connecting forms, and put them all back together and make a good guess at what these long words actually are. And that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something. Telos!